I did the first live stream a couple of weeks ago. That one was on Bitcoin, and got a lot of feedback on that one. And a lot of people were coming up with potential topics for the next one. And I think the most common request was for inflation or deflation. Which one is it going to be? Because there are a lot of people out there who are, who see the world similar to the way I do as far as the problems that are confronting the U.S. economy in particular, but the global economy as well. But everybody seems to fall into two camps as to how it's all going to go down. Whether it's deflation that's coming and you should prepare for that, or whether it's inflation that's coming and you should prepare for that. Now, I am an inflationist, right? I am in that camp. Other people in that camp, maybe like Jim Rickards, who falls in that camp, or Jimmy Rogers, or Mark Faber. There are a number of people who would be in the inflation camp. Deflation would be guys like Robert Prechter, Harry Dent. I mean, there are a number of guys that are looking for deflation. Now, before I really get into it, I want to talk a little bit about the terms so we know what we're talking with. Let's define the terms. I mean, what is inflation and what is deflation? Well, the actual definition of inflation, or the actual meaning of the word, is an expansion of the money supply. That's what inflation is. It's not about prices. If you think about the word inflate, right, what does inflate mean? It means to expand, right? You inflate a balloon, right? When you inflate a balloon, it expands. Prices don't expand. They go up, they go down, they don't expand. So what expands? Money supply. When the government creates money, the money supply expands. Like a balloon, it blows up. And so that's what inflation is. It's an expansion of the money supply. Deflation is the opposite. It is a contraction of the money supply. Now, when you inflate the money supply, when you create more money, you have more money bidding up prices. And so inflation will result in prices going up. But prices going up are not the inflation. They are the consequence of inflation. Now, sometimes you can have inflation even when prices are falling. Now, how can that be? Well, let's say prices were going to go up by, or suppose prices were going to drop by 5% one year. But instead, the government expands the money supply and prices remain the same. They don't decline by 5%. Well, prices are 5% higher than they otherwise would have been. So there's 5% inflation there. People were robbed of the benefit of being able to buy stuff for 5% less money. See, falling prices are a good thing. And if inflation prevents prices from falling, well, that is a bad thing. So inflation is when money supply expands. Deflation is when it contracts. Obviously, money supply has expanded dramatically as a result of quantitative easing, because quantitative easing is by definition inflation. It's an expansion of the money supply. And prices that went up were stock prices, real estate prices, bond prices. All those assets going up in price were also the result of inflation. Now, the reason that governments and economists and politicians try to change the name of inflation, or the definition, the meaning of inflation. If you get an old Webster's dictionary, it will define inflation as an expansion of the money supply. It's the newer dictionaries that define inflation as rising prices. And the reason that the government worked hard to change the perception and people's understanding of inflation is because if people understand that inflation is money supply growing, well, then they know who causes that. The government does that. But if people think inflation is rising prices, well, then they can blame it on businessmen or unions or whoever is raising the prices. And the government can pretend that there's some other source of inflation other than their own monetary policy. But inflation is created by government, and it's like a tax, right? When the government prints money and spends it into circulation, it is robbing everybody of their purchasing power. See, the government can take purchasing power from you in two ways. It can do it honestly through taxation, right? It can take some of your money through a tax. It could levy a tax and take your money, or it could just create money and spend it. And what that does is destroys the purchasing power of the money you have. So either way, you lose purchasing power. Either you lose it because the government takes your money, or you lose it because they take the value out of your money. So that's what's inflation. But now, when most people think about what's coming, are we going to have inflation or are we going to have deflation, they're focused on prices. So the people who think we're going to have deflation think prices are going to come down for everything, right? Stock prices are going to go down, real estate prices are going to go down, but they also think consumer prices are going to go down. Food prices, energy prices, the price of gold is going to go down. Everything is going to go down, and therefore their recommendation is to keep all your money in cash, right? To stay in dollars and to wait for everything to crash, and then use your dollars to buy a bunch of assets, including gold or stocks, because a lot of the people who are in the deflation camp still agree with me that we're ultimately headed for inflation. They just think it's deflation first. Like first we get big deflation and then we get massive or hyperinflation. So they want to prepare for what they think comes first. Now, I think that we're going to skip that part. I don't think we're going to have this big collapse in prices where the dollar rises and everything collapses. I think we're going to skip that, and I think we're going to have inflation. I think we're going to have prices going up. Now, we may not have stock prices going up that much, but I think that goods prices, food, energy, commodities, raw materials, agriculture, and gold, all those prices are going to go up much faster than the stock market or real estate. And I think the dollar is going to get killed. So I think that people who are preparing for deflation and who are holding on to US dollars are going to get killed. I think they're going to get wiped out. I think people that are in the US stock market will ultimately do better than people who are hoarding dollars or hoarding US treasuries. Now, the thing is, even if the deflationists are right and you adopt my strategy, you still win, because the deflationists will say in the long run, I'm right. We're going to have deflation first and then massive inflation second. But if I'm right and you follow the advice of the deflationists, you're wiped out. So if you're going to play it safe, if you're not sure who's right, is it going to be inflation or is it going to be deflation, by default, just take my strategy. Because even if the deflationists are right, if you sit tight, you'll win with my strategy. Now, you would be better off, if deflationists are right, to hold on to a bunch of dollars and buy gold when it goes to 500 or 400, wherever they think it's going to go. But if they think it's ultimately going to 10, 20,000 or wherever, if you buy it right now, you're still going to win. But if you follow the deflationists and you're sitting on all these dollars waiting for $500 gold and it never goes down there, right? If you're waiting for everything to fall and it never happens, you're like Charlie Brown, or like Linus and Charlie Brown's sister in that great pumpkin patch, waiting for this great pumpkin to come on Halloween, and he never shows up. Meanwhile, all the other kids are trick-or-treating and getting candy, and you're sitting there waiting for this great pumpkin. And that's kind of what I think the deflation boogeyman is. A lot of the people who think there's going to be deflation, these guys always look back to the 1930s, right? And they say, oh, we had deflation in the 1930s. Yeah, we were on a gold standard in the 1930s. There's a big difference between an economy on a gold standard and an economy that's on a fiat monetary system. I mean, if you want to measure prices in terms of gold, yeah, we're going to get deflation. I believe the price of everything is going to come down in gold. So if you have a gold dollar, right, if you have a silver dollar, or you have a $20 gold piece, for you, you're going to see deflation. You're going to see the price of stocks coming down. You're going to see the price of energy and food. Things will get cheaper, just like they did in the 1930s. Because in the 1930s, if you had a dollar, it was made of silver, right? You had real money. But people don't have that today. We just have paper money. And so the Federal Reserve is going to be able to do what it couldn't do in the 1930s. We are going to print money like it's going out of style. And that means it's massive inflation in terms of paper dollars. Now, a lot of people think, but Peter, you're going to see a contraction of the money supply because there's going to be all these defaults on bonds. No, there's not. there would be defaults on bonds if the government did the right thing. If the government allowed interest rates to really rise, then you would see a lot of bonds defaulting and you would see a lot of money disappearing, right? Because when somebody is owed $1 million and now the borrower defaults, that destroys $1 million. $1 million that I thought I had just evaporated because the guy that was going to pay me back doesn't have the money, and so the money disappears, right? And so you think, well, if money is disappearing because of defaults, well, then that's deflation because now there's less money. But that's not going to happen because the Federal Reserve and other central banks aren't going to let it happen. They will keep printing. They will keep interest rates artificially low. So the borrowers will not have to default. It'll be easy to repay their debts in cheap money, in debased money. That's what's going to happen. So the Federal Reserve, or rather the Treasury, is not going to default on its obligations. Everybody will be paid. They're going to be paid in money that doesn't buy very much, right? As long as they have a printing press. And even Ben Bernanke said that himself. He said there will never be deflation in the United States because as long as we have a printing press, we're going to use it. And that's one of the only things that Ben Bernanke is going to get right, right? The one thing the Federal Reserve could do is create inflation, right? And that's supposedly their goal where they're going to succeed. They're going to succeed beyond their wildest dreams. And I wonder when some of these guys, because a lot of the deflationists have been waiting for gold to collapse. Here we are, we're over 1,400 an ounce. I don't know when some of these guys are going to throw in the towel. Are they going to let gold go to 1,500, 1,600, 2,000? Are they going to wait forever for that great pumpkin of buying gold at 400, wherever they think it's going to go? When will they throw in the towel